Alright, Exile, so let's go over what's going to be the best build and what are kind of the fan favorites right now in the brand new Keepers League. So for starters, I'm going to go ahead and actually start off the video by going over the top tier in terms of the DPS. Now keep in mind, some builds are more oriented around doing bossing, and that's kind of where like any sort of mine builds really do excel. They have by a long shot the highest DPS. So I want to start off the video by going over that, and then two other really great recommendations, which are actually kind of the two popular like class ascendancies for the Keepers League. So for starters, as far as what is giving the biggest DPS, well, it's the Icicle mining of fanning. If I was to go over top 5, we'd basically be doing this like 5 times. So we're gonna have a little bit of variety in the video. There are lots of variants of it, but basically it is a very cheap build to go ahead and actually build. So what you want to try to shoot for in terms of like some of the uniques is the Annihilating Light. Now I'm going to warn you guys, if you're playing SSF, this build will be very hard to get like up and running because it requires like this item is really big for DPS, but you could also get Heat Shiver. These are all really cheap items. The taming is like okay in terms of the price point, but like a lot of these other items are like 1C, so you're going to be really good to go. But I also want to show off like brief gameplay. Now this build is really cheap to actually get up and running. However, I do have to say that it's mainly oriented around doing bossing content, but you can still just play the game with any build in PoE. You just obviously are going to be a little bit slower compared to some of the other faster builds that are just meant for like mapping. But the only like really expensive item here that I really see is like Bottled Faith. The rest of the stuff is pretty cheap and really achievable by all players. Obviously a Watcher's Eye is good. Disillusion is actually a pretty cheap item as well. But I want to show you guys some gameplay because I think that that kind of ties into the build as well. So going over kind of what the build would look like, and I'll provide all the sources, and I will also give you guys the planners here. But basically it has incredible DPS. This is like a boss over here, but this is kind of what it looks like. This way you guys can see the gameplay and decide for yourself if this is something you may want to go ahead and build into, as the DPS again is just incredibly high, and this is going to be one of the better builds if you are interested in doing bossing content, because bosses in this game, well, they could be pretty good for farming if you really want to maybe try to get a lot of currency in the league. This could be an excellent way to go ahead and get it. Now I'm not going to make this video necessarily a build guide over every single one of these builds that we go over, but at least this way you'll have an idea on what it looks like and kind of some of the gear requirements to get it up and running. Again, if you're playing solo self-found, Annihilating Light is like really hard to actually acquire because it's basically like an endgame item. However, it's such a cheap item, you can get it just for a couple C, so it's really cheap. And as far as like the new like flesh drafts, I'm not sure if any of the POBs actually work properly with this. Also keep in mind, take it with a grain of salt, because when I'm sorting by DPS, minion builds aren't necessarily going to be showing up, but this is kind of like the more popular builds in the current league. And again, just like every single league, mine's just absolutely dominate for raw DPS, because I wanted to go over the highest DPS because a lot of people kind of consider what does the most damage to be the best build, but that's not always true because there's speed content that people like to engage with as well. But this is going to be the Deadeye, so this is the class over here. And if you're new to PoE Ninja, again, I'll be linking all of these below for you guys, but basically you're just getting extra frenzy charges. Tailwind is really good, giving that increased effect of the marks over here, and Far Shot, so you get more damage as projectiles do travel further. But the full setup is the Icicle Mine of Fanning, and then you have the Trap and Mine damage support. We have Hypothermia. Awaken Elemental Focus is actually obviously expensive, but again, you can get this build up and running for relatively cheap in terms of like what is required for the build. Yeah, you also run Heat Shiver. This is actually a really cool item, so you gain extra cold damage as extra fire damage per chill effect on the enemy, and then you gain 30% of cold damage as extra fire damage against a frozen enemy. So basically, yeah, you're going to be getting a lot of extra damage, and then because this triples your elemental damage, this is like the key item to get the build up and running. And like I said, I already showed you guys gameplay. But real quick, this video is brought to you by Overgear. Overgear's got some awesome Path of Exile coaching to take your game to the next level. Whether you want to learn how to use the Atlas tree and find out how that works, or maybe you need a farming strategy for your build, or maybe you need an in-depth less on how the new league mechanic works, or maybe you need something very specific to your build and something different, they've got you covered. They have some of the best coaches around, and you guys can feel free to go ahead and use that link in the pin and in the description and take your game to the next level and save yourself some time and frustration and just get some advice from an expert from Overgear. Next up, now we're going to go over the top two most popular classes and ascendancies. This is going to be the Elementalist as well as the Deadeye. So with the Elementalist, the thing that everyone's playing right now for the most part is going to be Eviscerate. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like for gameplay. It hits really hard, but I have to also warn you guys that it is not going to be a very cheap build if you want to kind of min-max it. But as far as what makes the build expensive, and I'll show you guys some of the prices of some of the items. The other build that we just went over, it's really cheap, but this build, well, it's got kind of a premium end in terms of the gear that you want. Now keep in mind, you could always play budget versions of top tier builds and they'll still be very good, but like to get the build to have really good sustain, Aegis Aurora is fantastic because you get to recover energy shield up to 2% of your armor when you actually block. So it's a pretty big amount of survivability because you're going to be stacking a lot of energy shield. You can see it's 6,000 energy shield here. So that's what you're going to be building into with the build. Obviously, you're going to have some armor with like these the incandescent heart over here. This is another unique, but the expensive items with this, there's actually a lot of expensive items, but the Ephemeral Edge Dusk Blade here is actually going to be one of the key items. So what it does is it has a special unique power. It says attacks with this weapon have added maximum lightning damage equal to 12% of the player's maximum energy. So that's kind of how it works. All the damage, by the way, is with Eviscerate. There's also a tincture that you can run where it gives you increased elemental damage. Most of the time tinctures are like so cheap. You can spend like 1C, get a pretty decent one, but you want to get the damage over time multiplier with damage. Basically, you can get this on a lot of different areas, but this build, again, I'm warning you guys, not cheap. Like this is pretty cheap over here. Barracks is super cheap, but like Ash of the Stars, very expensive. Aegis Aurora, very expensive. Ephemeral Edge, very expensive. Now how expensive these are going to fluctuate depending on, of course, the time that you're looking at the video. But yeah, I mean, it's like just looking at the price points, I just got to warn you guys with this. Just like any build though, you can still build it as a budget build, but getting some sort of way to recover energy shield is going to be key. Obviously, Aegis Aurora is like absolutely top tier because you also get LE damage with attack skills, so like it just has some of the best synergy for the build. Almost every single build, by the way, will play Watcher's Eye. These are on average, well, it depends on how far the league is going on. Sometimes you get these for like 30C for like a bad one, but if you want a really good one, and we're looking in the Divine Pluses, there's also Impossible Escape. So again, there's a lot of things here that can make it more expensive here, but you're basically going all around the world over here, getting a lot of the nodes over here that giving you like block chance, because obviously you're going to be playing as the Elementalist. And so some of the things to note over here is like you can always shock over here, and you can always ignite over here, and then on top of that you get extra exposure, and then on top of that getting the golems are immune to LE damage, and they get increased effectiveness of the golems. If you kind of like having kind of a small little army, it is definitely fun to mess around with. But as far as like the main skill that you're using, it's Eviscerate. You can play Voltaity, you can play Awaken, the elemental damage with attacks. Obviously you can play the basic one here, and then all of like the Awaken gems. Again, this is a very expensive build if you play Awaken gems, but the whole build itself is pretty expensive, but it is still one of the top tier builds that a lot of people are playing right now. Fantastic stuff. Again, big DPS, and I'll also show you guys the gameplay in a second, just so you guys kind of get an idea. But yeah, you get a bunch of golems over here, so it's kind of fun. I like builds that have like the golems over here, and then you also have this, which is going to give you dot multi, and then you have the other things that give you extra regen over here. We get extra life regen and increased defenses. This build is actually very tanky. If you're looking to do like high-end content, I could actually recommend this even for beginners. It will take you a long time to build into it, I'm gonna be straight up. However, one thing that is really great with this build is the sheer amount of tankiness. Again, warn you guys, it's not going to be a build that's like super budget friendly to get it like in the premium state, but there's a lot of builds that always can scale into premium state, but it's a pretty strong build. Nonetheless, there's a gameplay over here, and again, I'll link these all down below so you guys can maybe like check it out. But this one was a little bit a while ago, but it's basically the same concept in terms of like what it looks like. I haven't found any like more recent gameplay, but just so you guys can see the gameplay, it's not going to be like a super snappy teleport across the screen sort of build, but again, it is super tanky, and it does do pretty good AoE clear speed, but like it's not going to be the Deadeye, so obviously you don't have all of the movement speed nodes that you can actually get. Alright, so next up, the second most popular class over here. In fact, right now Elementalist #1 spot for popularity. Doesn't mean it's the best, but to be honest, there's a reason why people play some of these things, right? So yeah, I put Elementalist here, and then also Deadeye. So what are people playing on Deadeye? Obviously I already showed you one of them, but the other reason why a lot of people are playing Deadeye is because Lightning Arrow is still like one of the more popular skills. Now I've been playing and I've been doing like a full walkthrough guide. You guys know I love playing bow every single league. You can play a lot of different things, but lightning arrow is one of the more popular builds, and I went ahead and kind of just showcased off what one can look like. Now, this one is going to be shown off as more of a premium version of the build with things like crystallized omniscience. This is kind of expensive. Here is ire. It starts off a little bit more expensive, but this goes super cheap later as the league goes on, and it just gives you a bunch of spell suppression as well as added cold damage. But it's not going to be a super tanky class, but you're going to be super far away, so it's pretty good for that. Now, on top of that, you're going to be running and stacking a lot of attributes if you want to go the premium end route for the build, but I want to show you guys gameplay of this one because I actually like this one the most. This is one of my favorite builds every single league. I always play some variant of bow, and lightning arrow is fantastic. It's super cheap and it's really good. Obviously, like I said, crystallized omniscience is kind of pricey, and obviously like Calendar's Trust, not the easiest things to get. However, again, you can get the build to be really smooth with like 10 chaos orbs. It's super cheap. In fact, a lot of times when I was showing off gameplay, like I've been doing a full walkthrough and playthrough guide, and I have every single build for every single act, so you guys can follow along. And again, this is like my version of it right here, and again, I made it super budget friendly, and we are still dominating content really fast. And I'll show you guys the gameplay in a second, but as far as like what you're really looking forward to getting is basically just lightning arrow. That's all you really need. And then depending on which variant you want to play, you can also play ice shot. That's another fantastic skill, but lightning arrow just has a really good clear speed that's really hard to beat. Eventually you will build into crit, but I would recommend in the very beginning, don't build crit, just like any other build. It just takes a long time to get that critical strike trance and multipliers up, so you can go into crit towards the end game. But again, I already have like the full build guide, but this is still one of the more popular builds in the game as far as it goes. It's really just running specifically lightning arrow and then just getting a lot of elemental damage, and that returning projectiles as well as Mirage Archer are fantastic for the new Keepers League because you activate a button, and I'll show you guys a quick little gameplay. This one's actually from me. I was actually doing, this is Act 8 over here. You guys can see, again, I'm just shooting once and I'm moving, I'm shooting once and I'm moving, and I get this Mirage Archer to basically hold still on our Ascendancy, and you could spec out of it later if you want to do like other content for like bossing. I still think it's pretty good because again, you're just summoning basically a stationary turret every single time you attack, and it's not like another button that you have to push. You can run Artillery Ballista, but this is my like playthrough, and like my bow was a 1 Chaos Orb, and I was just dominating all the way through until the end game because the Keeper's rewards are actually pretty good in terms of getting your either sockets or just getting a flat elemental damage. It's even great for solo self-found, so that's really great. So yeah, lightning arrow is probably my biggest recommendation, and I already have a full walkthrough and guide, and I'll also link that down below, as well as that site down below to get that Path of Exile coaching. But definitely check this build out if you guys have not played before. Again, I have a full walkthrough and guide that's going to take you from the beginning all the way to the end. It has every single thing that you would need for it. But anyways, that's going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, sub if you're new, and I'll update you guys if there's anything really cool to mention that is also really good in the next couple of days here. But this is kind of what it's looking like in terms of what people are playing and some of the more popular builds and great league starters for everyone. Anyways, take care, Exiles, and I'll see you in the next video. And check the pin, I'll put all of the POBs and all the info that you'll need.